The cry came first, thin and trembling, a sound that did not belong to the silence of the morning. It carried over the weeds, faint but insistent, like a thread pulling attention toward its hidden source. The man paused, his steps slowing as the sound returned again, sharper this time, and then broke into whimpers that faltered and faded. He followed it, parting the tall grass until the shape of a small body came into view. At the edge of a rusted wire fence lay a puppy, pressed so close against the metal that the curve of its ribs caught between the wires. Its fur was matted with dew, the pale coat darkened where the grass had clung through the night. Each breath was shallow, the chest rising in uneven rhythm. And with every movement came a small cry that seemed to empty what little strength remained. The man crouched, still, as if not to add weight to the fear already pressing against the young animal. He could see the pup's paws caught awkwardly between the fence and ground, the tiny claws scratched and worn from hours of struggle. A soft tremor ran through its body, the muscles jerking against exhaustion, until at last it grew still again, only the eyes shifting upward in a mixture of pain and uncertainty. He let his hand rest against the cool earth, steady and open, not reaching yet. The puppy gave a low moan, barely more than air, and lowered its head to the wire as though surrendering. The man leaned closer, his voice no louder than the breeze. "Easy now," he murmured, the words carrying no demand, only presence. Around them, the field seemed to hold its breath. The morning light caught on the fence, glinting faintly, and insects moved through the stalks in restless hum. A crow called once from far across the trees, but the stillness quickly returned, broken only by the quiet whimper that had led him here. The man shifted to see how the pup was trapped. The wires had bent inward just enough to close around its small body, holding it with unforgiving pressure. The more it had fought, the tighter the space had become. Red marks lined the fur where the metal pressed hardest. The pup shivered again, not from cold but from the body's last thin threads of energy slipping away. Slowly, he extended one finger and touched the edge of its fur. The pup flinched at first, a sharp reflex, but then stilled, eyes blinking against the closeness of this quiet stranger. A faint wheeze left its throat, not quite a bark, not quite a cry. It was the sound of an animal too tired to resist, yet still alive enough to respond. The man sat back on his heels, weighing his movements. To pull too quickly would bring pain. To wait too long risked letting weakness win. He breathed once, steadying, and pressed the fence gently with his palm, testing how much give the wires had. The metal groaned, shifting just enough to show that escape was possible. The puppy whimpered again, higher this time as if sensing the change. Its hind legs kicked weakly, then fell limp. The man withdrew his hand, not ready yet to act, only to let the animal know the touch would return. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You're not alone now." In that moment, something passed quietly between them. The stillness of a field, the weight of metal, the fragile thread of breath that could break or hold. The man's eyes stayed on the trembling body, memorizing each small rise of the chest, each flicker of the ears, as if these signs alone carried the promise that there was still time. The pup's gaze lingered on him, long and unblinking, before sliding closed again in surrender to exhaustion. Its body slackened against the fence, the last whimper fading into silence. The man leaned closer, steady hands preparing for the work ahead, as the fragile life before him rested in the pause between fear and rescue. The man lowered himself slowly into the damp grass, his knees brushing against the earth as though even the ground demanded quiet respect. The puppy lay rigid, its sides pressed so tightly against the wire that each breath came in shallow bursts. Its eyes, wide and glistening, flickered between panic and weariness, holding him as though waiting for what came next. The air was fragile here, caught between fear and the hope of relief. He let his weight settle, still and unthreatening. No sudden movement to deepen the small creature's alarm. His hands rested on his thighs, palms open, showing nothing but patience. The puppy's ears twitched at the faint sound of his breathing, its body quivering as though ready to flee if it could, though the fence kept it from escaping. The man's gaze softened. He watched how the little chest lifted, how each rise seemed to take effort, how the paws shifted weakly against the cold wire. He studied before acting, learning the rhythm of its struggle, the language of its silence. The pup gave another trembling cry, the sound rising, then breaking, as if its throat could no longer bear more. Only then did he move, the slow extension of a hand into the small space between grass and fence. The motion was steady, measured, with pauses built into each inch of reach, giving the pup time to see, to sense, to decide whether to resist. The puppy tensed, a brief jerk of muscle, but did not cry out again. Instead, its eyes fixed on the hand, unblinking, as if locked between instinct and exhaustion. The man's fingers hovered just short of touch. He let them linger in the air, close enough that the animal could smell the faint trace of soil and sweat, but not so close that it would feel cornered. His voice followed in a murmur, quiet words carried more by tone than meaning. "It's all right," he whispered, letting the calm rest in the air like a shield. The puppy twitched its nose, sniffing once, then let its head drop back to the wire. A soft whine slipped from its throat, tired and pleading. The man lowered his hand further, brushing lightly against the damp fur of its side. At the touch, the pup stiffened, breath catching, but the hand stayed gentle, unmoving, only warmth and steadiness against the sharp cold of the fence. He let the silence work, filling the gap where fear had lived a moment before. His thumb traced carefully along a patch of fur not caught by the wires, no pressure, only presence. The pup's eyes closed briefly, then fluttered open again, glassy with fatigue. Its ears angled back, not in aggression but in surrender to contact it could not resist. The man studied the tangle, measuring each bend of wire, each angle where fur met metal. He did not rush. His calm seemed to flow into the small body pressed before him, softening its trembling. The puppy shifted slightly, its paw dragging weakly across the dirt as though testing whether the touch meant harm. Finding none, it stilled again, its breathing shallow but less frantic. The man leaned close, his shadow crossing gently over the animal. He spoke once more, the words steady and low. "Almost there." His tone was steady enough to sound like certainty, even if the fence still held firm. A thin breeze passed through the weeds, carrying the faint rustle of dry stalks. The pup's body rose and fell with uneven rhythm, yet its cries had quieted. Its gaze, once darting, stayed on the man's hand, following the slow movement as he adjusted his fingers near the wire. The trust was not complete, but something had shifted. Fear no longer ruled every breath. The moment settled into stillness. A man kneeling in grass, a pup pressed against cold metal. The world narrowed to touch and breath. The quiet bond began here, in the patience of one and the fragile acceptance of the other. The man steadied his breath and set both hands carefully against the twisted fence. The puppy shifted weakly at the sound of the metal, a faint cry slipping through its throat. The wires had dug deep, pressing into soft fur and skin, holding the body with an unyielding grip. Every movement had to be measured, not only for fear of pain but for the fragile trust that had just begun to form. He pressed gently against one section, feeling where the metal had bent inward, trapping the ribs. The fence gave a little, creaking as though reluctant to release what it had caught. The puppy tensed, its ears twitching back, eyes flashing wide for a moment before dulling again under the weight of exhaustion. The man paused, keeping one hand close against its side so the animal felt more warmth than pressure. His voice was barely audible, carried on the air like part of the morning itself. "Easy now," he whispered. Bit by bit, he eased the wire outward. The strands resisted, sharp with rust, but under steady force they bent just enough to open a gap. The pup gave a sharp shiver, its hind legs scraping weakly against the dirt. A whimper rose, thin but alive, and the man froze until the trembling eased. Then, with slower care, he shifted another piece of wire, his movements always pausing long enough for the animal's breathing to steady. At last, one paw slipped free, dangling limply into the grass. The claws were worn, the pads scratched raw from hours of struggle. The man brushed the paw gently aside, making space for the rest of the body. The pup gave a low groan, pressing forward instinctively, but the remaining wires still held tight across its chest. The man leaned closer, using both hands now, forcing the rusted strands apart inch by inch. The metal scraped against itself. A sound harsh against the stillness, but beneath it came the faintest rush of air, the puppy's breathing, growing deeper as the pressure eased. Its body sagged, no longer stiff with resistance, as if sensing freedom just beyond reach. With one final push, the gap widened enough. The man slid his hand beneath the pup's chest and lifted gently, guiding it out from the snare. The fur came free in slow motion, strands catching on the rust before slipping loose. For a moment, the animal dangled, all strength gone, until he drew it fully into his arms. The small body was trembling, warm but fragile, the heart beating fast beneath a coat damp with dew. Its head lolled against his wrist, eyes half closed yet still following faint traces of light. The paws moved once, feebly scratching at the air before curling inward against his hand. He held the puppy close, not pressing, only supporting, as though the fragile weight itself could break. Relief carried through the silence like a release of air long held. The man spoke again, quiet enough that only the pup could hear. "You're safe now." The animal shifted slightly at the sound, its chest rising in an unsteady rhythm against his palm. One ear twitched, brushing against his sleeve. For the first time since he had found it, there was no sharp cry, no desperate thrashing, only the slow return of breath. The man let himself sit back into the grass, the puppy resting against his lap. He rubbed one finger gently over its damp fur, tracing the line where the wire had left a faint mark across its side. The skin was reddened but unbroken, the injury more of strain than wound. Still, the body shook with weakness, every muscle trembling as though the memory of entrapment had not yet left. The pup attempted to rise, pushing one paw forward. Its legs folded beneath it almost at once, the weight too much to bear. It slumped back, leaning against his hand. The man did not try to force it up again. Instead, he supported its body, giving space for strength to return in its own time. The morning light grew brighter as the field stirred with sound, the rustle of grass, the call of birds lifting into the sky. Yet in this small patch of earth, the world felt hushed, centered on the fragile creature that had fought so long to be free. The man's hands, scratched with rust, still cradled the pup, a barrier between weakness and the world's indifference. For now, there was no rush, no need for anything more than stillness. The wires no longer held. The cries had softened, and in their place lay the quiet relief of life spared. The man looked down at the trembling body and let the moment settle, as though even the breeze should move slower around them. The puppy lay trembling in the man's arms, its breathing uneven but steadying with each passing moment. The rusted fence stood behind them, silent now, no longer pressing against fragile ribs. Relief had begun to seep into the air when a sound, faint and almost buried in the stillness, stirred the man's attention once more. It was softer than the cries that had led him here, muffled, uncertain, like a voice calling from beneath the weight of grass. He lifted his head, listening. The sound came again, weak and broken, carried just above the hum of insects. At first it seemed like the whine of the puppy he held, but the movement of its chest did not match the call. His eyes narrowed, sweeping the weeds that bent gently in the breeze. Somewhere close, hidden by stalks and dew, Another life was pressing against the silence. The man adjusted his arms, letting the freed pup rest against the curve of his elbow, its body still too frail to resist. Slowly, he rose to his feet. Scanning the field, every step careful so as not to startle what lay waiting. The cry came again, sharper this time, though still thin with exhaustion. It rose and fell quickly, then was swallowed by quiet. He moved toward the sound, parting stalks with one hand. The freed puppy gave a small twitch as though it recognized something in the faint call, its ears shifting against his arm. The man paused, letting the grass settle, listening once more. The hidden voice seemed to answer that tiny gesture, a whimper responding to the faint stir of its sibling's presence. Pushing deeper into the weeds, he finally caught sight of movement low to the ground. A second puppy lay tangled among the thick stems, its fur nearly hidden beneath bent stalks and clinging soil. The little body trembled as it tried to rise, but its limbs folded again beneath its weight. It gave another muffled cry, throat raw, eyes struggling to open fully against the light. The man crouched, lowering himself as he had before, moving with the same patience that had calmed the first. His free hand reached gently through the grass, clearing away the tangled stems around the pup. The animal flinched at first, a sharp jerk of its head, then stilled when his touch did not press too hard. Its body was thinner than the one he carried, the ribs sharp beneath damp fur, each breath shallow and rapid. For a moment he stayed still, giving space. His shadow stretched over both small figures. The freed puppy stirred in his arm, releasing a faint whine that broke into a cough of sound. At that, the second lifted its head, eyes blinking, ears twitching forward. The recognition was subtle but undeniable, the bond of kin, reaching across fear. The man set the first pup carefully on the ground near his knee. It swayed, unsteady, but gave a weak bark, no louder than a whisper of air. The second answered at once, voice cracking but alive. Their calls met between the blades of grass, carrying relief neither could show in strength of body. The man watched quietly, his hand steady near them both, ready but not imposing. He cleared the last stalks away, making space for the weaker pup to be seen fully. Its paws shifted against the soil, claws scraping lightly, but it had little energy left to push further. Its body sagged, yet its gaze remained fixed on the sibling only inches away. The man lifted it with care, fingers sliding beneath its frail frame, raising it gently until both rested against the crook of his arms. Together they trembled, pressing instinctively into one another, the first nestling its head against the second's side as if anchoring it. The air filled with a low chorus of breath and whimpers, fragile but shared. The field grew quiet around them, the moment sealed by the simple truth of two voices that had found each other again. The man stood, holding them both close, feeling the fragile warmth gathered between their small bodies. The rescue was no longer singular. What had seemed a solitary cry of need had opened into the presence of two, bound by survival and the soft weight of reunion. The man shifted both fragile bodies against his arms, the first pup pressing weakly into the second as though afraid the distance might return. Their whimpers overlapped, soft and uneven, carried on shallow breaths. Each sound seemed to call and answer, proof that neither had been lost to silence. The weeds that had once hidden them now bent aside, revealing not just struggle but a reunion, fragile as morning light. He knelt in the clearing, lowering the pups onto the ground beside one another. The first, though still unsteady, found enough strength to press its nose against the other's neck. The smaller sibling responded with a faint cry, muffled but determined before leaning into the touch. Their trembling bodies aligned, one leaning for warmth, the other offering it without thought. The man watched as the freed pup attempted to stand, legs wobbling beneath it. It took one step before collapsing gently against the second, whose own paws twitched with the instinct to move but failed to lift. Instead of frustration, there was stillness, the quiet of two animals content only to remain near, breathing in the same patch of grass after hours of separation. He studied the marks left on them both, the faint red line pressed into one's ribs from the wire, the soil clinging to the fur of the other, the scratches along their paws. Each sign told of struggle, of time spent apart yet within reach of one another's cries. The sound of their reunion was not loud or triumphant, but soft, almost private, carried in the faint murmurs of whimpers and the shallow rhythm of breath. The man extended his hand again, brushing lightly along their sides to test for deeper wounds. Both pups flinched at first, small jerks of muscle, but neither pulled away completely. Their ears tilted back, then forward again, signaling confusion edged with trust. When his hand settled into stillness, both pressed faintly toward the warmth, their trembling slowing as though reassured. One of them lifted its head, muzzle brushing the other's ear, and gave the faintest bark, a sound broken by fatigue, more whisper than voice. The second responded instantly, a cracked note that seemed to echo its sibling's attempt. The two sounds wove together, fragile yet certain, a confirmation that their bond had survived the hours of fear. The man exhaled softly, feeling the relief settle over him. "Together now," he murmured, voice low, the words more rhythm than meaning. The pups shifted again, leaning so close their small bodies seemed to fold into one. Their eyes blinked slowly, half closed, but their closeness gave them strength that neither had shown alone. Around them, the grass swayed, tall blades bowing under the wind. A bird called from the far edge of the field, answered by another deeper in the trees. The world moved on, yet here in this narrow space, time slowed, shaped only by the fragile breaths of two lives no longer lost to one another. The man waited, allowing them to rest side by side, watching as their tremors began to ease. Their paws shifted again, brushing lightly against each other, claws dull against damp soil. It was not play, not yet, but a quiet gesture of presence, a reminder of closeness regained. For a long moment, he did nothing more than observe. There was no need to rush. The fence, the weeds, the hours of struggle were behind them. In their place remained the silent comfort of reunion, carried in the warmth of two small bodies pressed together against the earth. The two puppies rested close to one another, their small bodies pressed together in the cool grass. Their breathing, once sharp and broken, had begun to steady into a rhythm that matched the quiet pulse of morning. The man knelt beside them, his hands still near, though no longer holding them. The work was done, and what remained was only the soft presence of life returning to calm. He leaned back slightly, watching as one pup shifted its nose against the other's neck, pressing closer with a faint sound no louder than the wind. The second answered with a soft whine, then grew still, its chest rising and falling in slower measure. The earth itself seemed to ease beneath them, as though the struggle that had bound them had finally loosened its grip. The man stayed silent, his body still as the light crept further over the field. He had no need to touch them now, no need to speak. The bond they shared was stronger than anything his hands could give. Their movements were small, an ear twitching against the breeze, a paw sliding faintly through the grass. But each gesture carried the truth of resilience, fragile and enduring all at once. The sky shifted above, pale hues turning toward warmth, the horizon brushed with early gold. Dew clung to the weeds, shimmering faintly as the day opened. Around them, birds lifted into the air, their wings breaking the silence with steady beats. The world was moving forward, carrying these small lives with it, as if dawn itself had been waiting for them. One of the pups stirred, lifting its head for a moment. Its eyes blinked against the brightness, then turned back toward the sibling pressed close beside it. The two leaned together again, their bodies touching from shoulder to paw, as if each breath found steadiness in the other. The sound of their whimpers had gone, replaced now with the quiet hum of survival. The man rose slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace forming at his feet. He brushed the dirt from his palms, the marks of rust still faint on his skin, reminders of the wires he had bent aside. For a moment he looked down at the puppies, letting the silence hold him. His voice came once more, no louder than before, meant only for them. "You're all right now." They did not respond with sound, only with closeness, their small frames pressing into the earth as the warmth of the day began to gather. The man took a step back, then another, leaving the space for them to rest undisturbed. The puppies did not notice his retreat, or perhaps they did and found no reason for alarm. Their world was each other, and that was enough. The field carried on around them. Insects moved through the grass, a crow called distantly, and the breeze swept through the weeds with steady patience. The man paused once more, letting the image fix itself in memory. Two small creatures, fragile yet unbroken, breathing into the dawn. As the sun crested, the light reached them fully, brushing their fur in warmth that replaced the night's cold. Their bodies, once trembling, now lay quiet, the rhythm of their breath aligned with the earth itself. The man turned then, stepping slowly away, leaving behind not just a rescue, but a moment that felt sacred in its simplicity. The puppies remained together in the grass, their cries now silenced, their breaths soft and sure beneath the rising light.